the reality of running is that we don't want to get injured, then we shouldn't run because running is a high injury rate sport. I know I wrote the book, You Can Run Pain-Free, and I wholeheartedly believe that we can, but it doesn't make it an easy pursuit.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who is excited to be a keynote speaker in July, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 116 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are a new listener, welcome. You have picked a good episode to start with. If you are a loyal listener, thank you so much for being here. You are just making me feel so special with all your support. Now, last week we had a bit of an emotional and much needed episode about eating disorders with Sarah Canny. It's something very common in our running world, but often brushed under the carpet as it makes people feel uncomfortable to talk about. So I thought we should face it head on with someone who's been through it and come out the other side. If you or someone you know is working through that, please send this episode to them. Now, today I'm bringing back one of my good friends. I say bringing back, but sadly, this is the first time he's been on the Running For Real podcast. I interviewed him a few times on Run to the Top, and he's one of the key members of the Coming Back from Injury podcast series, which you may have heard me talk about, which is a series that is created especially for those, as you can imagine, who are in an injury state. So if you have an injury right now, and it kind of covers all the things you should be doing right now, how to reflect and make sure it doesn't happen again. And of course, the mental side of it, which is actually the thing that Brad is focusing on in his episode. I have a link to that in the show notes if you want to check it out. And if you are injured, I really recommend it. It's a great podcast series. Speaking of that, if you would like me to email you the show notes every Friday, send me an email, tina@tinamuir.com, and I can do so. I mentioned a few months ago that I have a wonderful writer, Jacob, who's a much better writer than I am. He summarizes and gives the important points from the episode in a really easy to read format. So I can email those to you if you like, just let me know. Anyway, back to today, we have Brad Beer on the show. Brad is the founder of Pogo Physio, which is a very successful physiotherapist practice on the Gold Coast in Australia. If you followed me a few years ago when I was training for the Gold Coast Marathon, it was actually the race I was training for when I kind of stopped dead with my running. I was going there because Brad had told me just how incredible the Gold Coast Marathon was, and he'd helped me organize going out there. Someday I am going to run that race. I just know it. It's definitely near the top of my list. Brad is not just a great physiotherapist, but he's a wonderful person. Truly one of those people you meet who just make everyone around them light up. You will soon see that if you haven't already. So let's dive into this conversation with Brad after we give a big thank you to our wonderful sponsors, Aftershocks and Body Health. This episode is sponsored by Aftershocks, the award-winning headphone brand, best known for its open-ear listening experience, powered by patented best-in-class bone conduction technology. Aftershocks headphones sit outside your ear so you can hear your music and your surroundings. I know. Aftershocks is a must-have for runners, providing the ultimate level of safety and comfort without compromising sound quality. To learn more and save $50 on Aftershocks endurance bundles, visit tina.aftershocks.com. That's tina.aftershocks.com. Thank you so much to our loyal friends at Body Health for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. We all know by now that we need protein, but what many don't know is that even though we do get amino acids that help with repair from our food, the essential amino acids in perfect amino are the exact proportion needed for maximum utilization by the body, meaning our bodies have to work less hard because, come on, it's already being pushed hard enough by our training. So do your body a favor, get yourself some Body Health Perfect Aminos by visiting tinamuir.com/aminos.
Tina, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. You must be absolutely exhausted. Well done on Boston.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm tired and I'm very, very sore. Like I haven't been this sore since my first marathon. So yeah, this is really beating me up.
No, well done. Sensational run. And
it wasn't, that's the thing though. Like I worked so hard for that time. Like Brad, I was like at mile 16, like, or mile 12, like thinking I'm going to call Steve. Cause like I was honestly thinking about calling Steve to be like, Steve, I think I'm going to have to walk. Like, I don't think I can like run the whole way. Like I honestly have no idea how I got to the finish line. Like I was hurting so early on. Like I just can't, I'm really just like blown away with myself, my like toughness, because like there were so many stages where I was like, I was taking Gatorade every mile from like mile 16. I never, ever drink Gatorade, one. And two, like, I don't know about you, but when I've been towards the end of marathons, it's too much energy to go pick up a cup, which sounds ridiculous, but that's what I think. But this time, it was just keeping me going. Just get to the Gatorade, just get to the Gatorade. But then I was just like, it was getting to the point where I was like, I'm going to walk when I get to the next station, but I'd get there and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't allow myself to walk. And I don't know, like, honestly, Brad, I remember getting to 20 miles and being like, oh my God, 6 miles to go. Like, how am I going to make it 6 miles? But somehow, like, I did. And yeah, so I'm honestly, that's probably one of my proudest running moments, like making it through that. But to have run 2:58 and worked that hard is just like, whoa. I know 2:58 is fast for most people, but like, I'm just like, oh my God, like there's 25 minutes slower. And I like worked for that so much more than any other marathon I've done. So,
but do you know what I like? Anyone that knows you knows how fast you have run and can run. But the fact that you're still out there putting your best foot forwards, it actually endears you to a whole bunch of people. Like, even though in yourself you're disappointed, which I understand.
I mean, it's not the time. I'm not worried about that. It's just, sorry, you were saying.
Oh, no, I know what you mean. You worked harder than what your result reflected. I saw your post go up and I know what you've done in the past and what you're capable of. And I thought, you know what? I know something's obviously, unless, you're expecting to run that, something just hasn't happened on the day. But you're still there and people know that. And I think that's what people respect and love about you, is that you are real about it. And it's like, some days are good and some days aren't,
it was a rough one, but I'm just glad I made it. But the weird thing was, I've said there was not one point where I thought about dropping out. Like when I was running an elite, every single marathon or every even half, I'd be like, I wonder if I dropped out now, like maybe I could say my hamstring was hurting, or maybe I could say my, something was bothering me. But this time I knew I was going to get there. Like I knew if I had to walk, I was going to get there. It's just a very different place to be. I guess a lot of that, and I'd be interested to hear what you think. And actually, Brad, I've decided I might just keep this as part of the episode, because people keep asking me if there's going to be a Boston recap episode. I don't want to do a whole episode on it, but I'm just going to keep our conversation, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
And have this be a little bonus. But I wonder if that's the expectations. When you're an elite runner, you don't want that time next to your name, or you don't want people to judge you. Whereas this time it wasn't about the result or sponsors. It was about me. I wanted to finish the Boston Marathon. And so that's why it never crossed my mind. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I just think there's a strength in putting your best foot forwards on the day, and the commitment to finish is always so strong. And it's interesting. This is I guess the first for you, not having the pressure of sponsors and, team selectors and that on your shoulders. So you really are just running for for yourself and obviously your family and Bailey, who I know you're away for 4 days, which is a marathon in itself when you're a new parent. How'd that go?
Well, what's interesting? Like my mum had to keep reminding me to check in with Steve, because that weekend was so intense. Like it was just one thing after the next. Like I felt like I was on for, other than the time I was sleeping, I was on. Like I was meeting this person here, I was doing this. Like, I did so much in that weekend. It sounds bad, but I like literally compartmentalized and kind of, I knew she was there always in the back of my mind. And every time I looked at my phone, there's her face. But at the same time, I was so kind of busy and thinking about the next thing and just trying to just be, appreciate the fact that I was in Boston, that my mum would be like, have you spoken to Steve? Yeah. And I was like, oh, first thing this morning. And she'd be like, don't you think you should give them a call? And I was like, yeah. But then she was really mad at me for the first 2 days. She was just pouting, like would not crack a smile, like giving me like a death stare. Like she was clearly pissed off at me. So that also made it not fun to talk to her, because I felt like she was just like devastated without me, and it was like crushing me. So, but then she finally smiled on the third day. But yeah, it was tough being away.
Oh gosh, yeah, it always is, no matter it's the first time or the 17th time. So, no, well done.
Okay, well, I want to get on to you. I've allowed people to hear my update. You guys listening got to hear me talking to a friend, telling him what happened for real. And you can go check out my social media to read actually what else I said. But you got to hear it raw coming out of my mouth, because I was not aware I was going to release this to you guys. So you get to have an inside look. So, right, let's get back to you, Brad. My friend, I am so excited to have you here on the Running for Real podcast. And I haven't had you on this main podcast. I've had you on my podcast series. I had you on Run to the Top. But for those who don't know the absolutely wonderful Brad Beer, tell us, who are you other than a physiotherapist, author of You Can Run Pain Free, and founder of Pogo Physio? Who is Brad Beer?
I am, Tina. Thank you for the invitation for this. And yes, as you say, we are good friends going back quite a few years, but I just identify myself now as a father of two beautiful girls, a 5 and 2 year old,
and they are beautiful.
Obviously, who have both actually just fallen asleep, which is a rarity at this time of evening. They're normally up a bit later, but so father of two, an avid runner, lover of physical performance, in the pursuit of seeking our best, and really. The new world of being a parent, it simplifies things in many ways, but it challenges in others.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I love you. I will agree with you that you have always put being a dad first. You clearly love your girls to death. I just always melt every time I see pictures of you with them, and they're just so adorable. And they look like they absolutely adore you. But that being said, you are also insanely busy, Brad. I don't know how you fit everything in your life that you do. So well done to you for making sure the girls always come first, but at the same time, being able to carve yourself out a career, be successful, help other people primarily. And I want to start with that, because for those listening, Brad's social media, particularly, I mostly see it on Instagram. I'm sure it's the same on Facebook and Twitter, but Brad's social media is absolutely a goldmine. There is so much good information in there. You will see post after post of helpful information, things that you won't see other places, but are the questions you've always wanted to know. Now, one thing I saw recently was you said you did a post, 5 things physios. So for my Americans listening, physiotherapist is, Brad, you can clarify this, kind of a bit like a physical therapist, but a bit more, I guess for me, it's kind of more sciencey, kind of a bit higher up than a physical therapist. Tell me if that's right.
Well, I think they're equivalent, but yeah, good question, Tina. I think they're technically equivalent, physiotherapist, but obviously the training can be a bit different continent to continent. So I think technically they're the same degree, if you like, qualification, but the training can be quite different. Although for proactive practitioners, I think the world of information we now inhabit has brought like-minded people closely together. Mm-hmm. So in many ways, I think the really proactive, motivated therapists in Australia probably speak a similar language more so than ever with, say, their US counterparts.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. All right, so you had a post that was said 5 things physios should not say to runners. I'll just read them out, and then if you want to tell us why you think that's the case, or what should someone do if one of their physios does say this to them. So just kind of give us some context here. All right, so running isn't for you. just rest for X number of weeks. Have you considered other exercise? Start with 1 minute on, and there's a lot that needs fixing. Now, what should someone do if they are seeing someone who kind of says one of those things?
Yeah, good question. I'm glad you did read them out, Tina, because I couldn't recall them off the top of my head, and my internet's playing up, so I couldn't pull it up on the computer. But I think the reason I posted that is words are so powerful. Words have the power to create. Words have the power to pull things apart as well. And so, I always say a therapist's job is to work with their hands and their mouth. And I think the unique needs of a runner are that they need to feel understood. And so sometimes when those less than careful sayings can come out of a therapist's mouth who the runners trust in to be their guide, I think it can really have a negative effect in terms of their hope that their injury can be improved, in terms of, they just want to please the therapist, and all of a sudden it might seem like they're not. So, yeah, there's a real responsibility for any therapist working with runners to be mindful of their language. And it's not just runners, it's any patient, in general.
Mm-hmm. And with those specifically, I agree with what you just said right there. But for someone who, particularly the one that stands out to me, there's two actually, running isn't for you and there's a lot that needs fixing. I mean, you mentioned there about kind of physios being a guide, and the words that you use can be very damaging to someone's hope or the way that they feel. And those two in particular, I think, I've heard people saying that about themselves. Well, maybe running isn't for me. Maybe I'm just not meant to be a runner. I'm just going to kind of back off. What would you like to say to someone who maybe has heard a physio say that, or maybe they're just thinking that themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oftentimes people can let that thought creep into their mind when they've been injured or are currently injured. Maybe this isn't for me. Loved ones can share that, often with the best intention that, they're seeing the runner suffer injury after injury. They don't like seeing them frustrated and disillusioned. So, have you thought about maybe it's something else? So it's just the reality of running is that if we don't want to get injured, then we shouldn't run because running is a high injury rate sport. I know I wrote the book, You Can Run Pain-Free, and I wholeheartedly believe that we can, but it doesn't make it an easy pursuit. There are still so many factors that influence, our injuries. So in terms of running isn't for you, running is for everyone. So there isn't anyone on the planet that can't benefit from running and that can't achieve a goal that's meaningful to them with the right outlined help. It's just a matter of whether they want to prioritize that as a great enough part of their life to do the work to hopefully keep them injury free.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to go into some of those things in a few minutes. But for someone who is in this situation, keeps getting injured over and over again, what is something that they should be thinking about to try and change something? They're in that stage. I don't know if I'll ever be healthy again. Is it even worth it? It keeps breaking my heart. Where are some places you would suggest they start?
Yeah, and I know many runners find themselves in that situation. And it's just a matter of, will I ever get out of this? And it can be absolutely soul, crushing, whether that's the elite athlete or the recreational athlete or runner. I think that the best place to start is always with a clear diagnosis, which is obviously a given, but without that, you can't move forward. So diagnosis comes first, Tina. Second is an understanding of the contributing factors that led to the injury. And that's where an astute practitioner is necessary, that someone that understands the sport of running, that can do a comprehensive assessment. Things that you're looking for there are really, I think of it quite simply, 13 years into my physio career, for most runners, the running-related injuries are simply a mismatch of the training load and the runner's capacity to deal with those training loads. So where in the past we've often said running injuries are overuse injuries, I tend to refer to them now as under-preparation injuries. Most runners just haven't got the physical resilience at any given point in time to deal with that given training load. So the load exceeds the capacity and then an injury ensues. So I think just having someone in your corner that can look at your unique situation, reverse engineer from your goals, and come up with the solution. And Tina, honestly, the further I've gone in my career, the more simple I think it is. And most of the runners that I see just have a lack of capacity. And how do we deal with their capacity primarily and enhance it? Most of the time it's through strength training. Generally, I think if runners were stronger, there wouldn't be as many injuries.
And so for someone listening, you said strength training there, and you do talk about this a lot. I mean, I'm a huge advocate. I know you have either follow my strength coach or he follows you. I can't remember which way around it is.
Both.
And okay, you know that, I'm a fan of it as well. But for runners listening, they're thinking, how does lifting things up and, heavy weights, carrying them around, how's that going to help me with my running? Surely I just need to do more running.
Yeah, that's commonsensical thought, to get better, just run more. The challenge with that is that, one of the things that happens is from the age of 20 onwards, we lose strength. And that's something we don't see in the mirror. We don't see that loss of strength. It's a little bit like termites in your house frame. Hopefully you don't have them there, but if they are there, then they're nibbling away and you don't know that you've got those there until there's a problem. And often that's the case with running injuries. So an injury kicks in and then you get assessed and you're like, wow, I actually don't have the strength I need below my knee. So I think the easiest way to counteract that thought through runners thinking that all they need to do is run is an assessment where you strength test them against known benchmarks for strength that, is needed, and they can appreciate the gaps that they've got, or, point to the literature. So some runners are like, I hear about how that can help minimize injuries, strength training, which there's plenty of evidence for. But when we talk about how it can improve running efficiency or speed at maximum, aerobic capacity, 5K time trial performance, all the studies that have been done connecting strength training with running performance, then most runners are normally sold. So whilst minimizing injuries is nice, it's the performance enhancing effects of strength training that I think most runners find appealing and put their ear out for.
Mm-hmm. And, is it kind of a case, just going into this just a little bit deeper to help people understand, is it kind of a case of, you take something like one Drew has me do every week almost without fail is like a dumbbell row. So I'll put my hand on a bench, lift the weight up towards my shoulder. And for someone listening, or if I, didn't understand and hadn't seen the benefits, I would think, how is, lifting a weight up to my shoulder going to help me stay healthy? Or how is that going to help me with my running? Or maybe you take something like, another thing Drew is a big fan of is I'm not sure if you do these, Brad, but like carries, where you hold a heavy weight in one hand and, you're trying to keep yourself upright even though the weight is pulling you down. Someone's thinking, well, how's that going to help me carrying a heavy weight? So just like from the standpoint of looking at these exercises and thinking, well, surely if I want to do strength training, I can do things with my legs. Maybe I'll do more squats, or maybe I'll do things that you could kind of see being related. But what about those ones that maybe don't look like they would be helpful, but maybe a strength coach says they actually will be? Why is that going to help the runner?
Yeah, like you referred to there, Tina, like carries with kettlebells and things that don't directly look connected. There's the neuromuscular effect where your body's, developing control through being in different positions. And running is such a repetitive action. So anything you can do to load up in different movement planes can be helpful. So there's that neuromuscular effect. You're priming your muscular system to adapt to different stimulus. There's, it doesn't have to mimic the running action to be effective. In fact, I find with strength training, because most runners are time poor, the more isolated the work can often be for people that don't have a lot of time, sometimes the better the result. So, that you don't have to mimic a running form in the weights room to be being effective.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to bring this home one more time for everyone and say that, I talked to Brad, you heard at the beginning about Boston. And after I spoke to my husband, Steve, at the end of the race, I kind of said to him pretty similar to what I said to Brad there. And Steve's response was, do you know, one of the main reasons I think you were able to get through that was because of Drew. He said, I don't think without the work you'd been doing with Drew, which we'd been doing a lot of slowing down movements essentially to prepare for the downhill. Like I would step off a box with a weight and had to lunge off a box with a weight and had to slow my movements down to kind of prepare for the downhills, things like that. But I just wanted to clarify for everyone listening that my husband, my coach, said that, he and I had kind of maybe not planned my training correctly, or maybe it was the fact I went off 30 seconds per mile too fast, probably that. But he said the only reason he thinks I was able to survive, or one of the only reasons apart from kind of grittiness, was the work I did with Drew. So I just want to clarify that one more time, that this is serious what we're talking about here. This really, really does help. And I do have a strength training program with Drew if you are interested. And I'm sure Brad has some stuff he could point you to if you're interested as well. But I want to get on to something. This is a bit of a random, very specific one, but I see so many conversations about this. And this is the one that seems to be changing the most, seems to be kind of confusing people the most. Let's talk a bit about tendon injuries. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's now called, tendinopathy. It's all kind of changing constantly with what is suggested of, I'm sorry if you guys can hear Bailey up there. My mum is moving her to a different room.
Gorgeous.
Not right now. She's screaming. So tendinopathy, but it seems like the suggestions, the rules are kind of changing constantly right now with tendon. So tell us, what have you found to be the case right now?
Yeah, I mean, things have definitely shifted over 10 years. The old term tendinitis is now well and truly defunct, and people have mostly adopted the contemporary term being tendinopathy. In saying that, the best researchers that are looking at this most closely are now realizing that there is still some inflammation in the tendon. So tendinitis isn't necessarily completely wrong, but where it can, I think catch a runner out is, you think, okay, if it's tendinitis, a tendon's inflamed, then what does it need? It needs anti-inflammatories and rest. The problem with that is most sore tendons that runners have are sore because they haven't been used enough. And this is where it gets so funny, because you think, it hasn't been used enough. Well, isn't that why it's sore? Because it's been overused. Well, yes, there's that overuse side of it. So runners spike their training load. They've gone from 50K a week to 100K or whatever it might be. But they haven't used it in the sense of heavy strength work to actually develop a robust and stiff tendon that we need. So say in the case of an Achilles tendon, what happens, we mentioned termites eating away at our strength as we age, and it might seem depressing, but it's just the reality. We lose about 30% of strength between 20 and 60 years of age. Like it or lump it, that's what's happening, unless we are counteracting that with strength work. So in the case of an Achilles, over that same 4 decades of time, we will lose 15% of the cross-sectional area of our calf, and we'll lose 30% of power from the calf Achilles complex. So when an injury hits something like an Achilles tendon to develop a tendinopathy, the treatment, and this is where it's changed over the years, is no longer sitting around resting the thing. The treatment is, pulling back on the training loads, getting the pain under control, but then it's doing regular every couple of days, progressively getting heavier, lifting in a gym where people will be, for an Achilles, doing seated calf raises heavy and standing calf raises heavy. And we're talking about seated stuff being sometimes up to 2 times body weight, and standing stuff being 1.3 times body weight. Because looking below the knee as an example, the forces that calf muscle deals with are 2.5 to 3.5 times body weight. Now soleus can deal with 6 to 8 times body weights at peak force. So, so that's where the treatment's changed, Tina, and the old passive approach to tendon care is out, and the contemporary thinking is, to get a tendon better, you've got to load it up, and it's through strength work.
And that's something realistically you have to really go see an expert. That's not something you can just kind of, play around with yourself at home or do things, you've seen on an article. That really should be something you should see someone for.
Yeah, you do need to be guided through the journey. And, I enjoy treating tendons because it's challenging, but it's also very rewarding when you give the patient, the client, the right tools. And and they'll be able to, with your help with the program, navigate themselves out of it. I mean, I do a lot of telehealth Skype consults with runners in Australia, interstate, and some overseas. And the beauty is I never lay a hand on them. And just through moderating the load in their running training and progressing their gym work or their strength work, their resilience building, their capacity building, you can get a tendon right and completely settled down. And not only that, they come back generally better off because they've built the capacity, there's that word again, the strength, if you like, in their system to deal with often higher training loads than what they could deal with initially.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then just a few more things about tendon things, very tempting. If it's in your hamstring, you want to stretch it. If it's in your Achilles, you want to do that calf stretch. We often want to try and massage if it feels like it's a lump. Just a few little things, some mistakes people tend to make, maybe icing it. What are some things you would just say that people might be doing, not really thinking about it, that is actually hindering them rather than helping?
Yeah, brilliant question. Stretching, stop it. I often just joke, with that. It's like, nope, stop it. And I'll put my palm in someone's face. Stop it. Don't do any more. Just for capturing their attention. So in Achilles, that's, stop stretching off the edge of a step. I know it feels like that's what it needs, but often that's just irritating it. Don't stop running if you can avoid it. Try and keep running, but drop speed out, for example, drop incline workout. I often say halve your total volume for the week as step one, and we'll go down lower if we need to, but don't sit around and give it complete rest, because what then happens when you get back to running, be it 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, is there's a relative big jump in the workload again, and tendons don't deal well with quick changes. So that'd be the big three. Don't stretch, don't rest, and the other thing would be just don't look to passive therapies to get a tendon better. Massage won't fix it. Shockwave alone won't fix it. Dry needling won't fix it, and leave it alone. Stop poking the thing. Just let it settle down.
And that is very tempting, isn't it, when it does hurt? And what about ice?
Yeah, I mean, give or take. I mean, it's not going to do it any harm, but you'd be better off to spend that, 5 minutes that you're going to ice it for, to do some isometric, work. Go and do something that has been shown to help with the pain modulation, and that's Achilles come up and hold on your toes in a calf raise position. So I just generally try and educate people that passive stuff really isn't going to get them very far at all, and they've got to quickly jump onto the active side of the rehabilitation. Okay,
good. Thank you. And that's just because that's something I've, you see this conversation going again and again, and I just, never really sure what the consensus is, as it does seem to be changing. But what you've said there, that's helpful, because people can actually take that and use it. Now, on that note, is there anything else with any other injuries in the last few years maybe has changed the way that it's been recommended to kind of treat them? I've had you on before. I don't want to keep rehashing the same questions. As I've mentioned, Brad has been on Run to the Top. I've got him on my Coming Back from Injury podcast series, particularly talking about the emotional side. So, and he does have his book, You Can Run Pain Free. So I don't want to keep going over these same things, but there may be some things in the past few years that you've kind of been like, that's interesting. That may have been different to what I was telling people when I first started my practice.
Yeah, great question. Things change so much, and I think it's almost embarrassing the further you're in it. It feels like what you give to patients is so commonsensical that it's like, is there any value in that? But I think there's always value in simplicity. And so I was just having this conversation today with a graduate physiotherapist that works with us at Pogo Physio. It's like the longer you go, the more simple everything seems to become, I think, if you're doing it well, versus going the other way where it seems really complex. So definitely things change. One thing, for example, that I've even experienced myself is, 50% of injuries for runners strike the knee.
So 50% of every injury that, if you added all of the runners' injuries, are in their knee.
Yeah.
Wow.
Correct. And then 50% of those injuries is patellofemoral pain or kneecap pain. And this has been the one thing that I've struggled with the most over my running life versus a triathlete than as a runner. And I have not been able to race for 2 years. My last race was the Gold Coast Half Marathon in 2016. I developed really bad, deep kneecap pain after that. And, I was pretty disillusioned over the last few years, felt like I could never get back to pain-free running again. And in the last 3 months, I've been able to go from 10 Ks of running a week to 50, 60 Ks of running a week with zero pain and putting some intensity in. Long way to go, but I feel good about the fact that I can get out there and enjoy it without worrying about my knee. So I guess to answer your question, what have I learned? The big difference maker for me, Tina, with getting my knee right was sucking up my own medicine, and that is to get in the gym and get strong. And when I started squatting on my knee, I had pain. It was 60 kilos of weight. So excuse the fact that it's in kilos if anyone's a bit more familiar with pounds. I'm an 80-kilo male, so I was doing less than my body weight. I was in pain, but I persisted, and I'm now up to 120 kilos, 3 by 8 reps, and that's not because I'm some superhero. I've just progressed it. And that my quad strength's gone through the roof. My hamstring strength I've really focused on. So I guess as a general answer, that's one thing that I'm just really passionate about is reinforcing to runners when they feel like they're lost in the wilderness, be it knee pain, tendon pain, hip pain, whatever it is, that there's probably a lot more resilience they can build in their body.
You mean even while injured?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that really only it has to happen, while they're injured to get them back. But once again, the best medicine is strength work. That's why I feel as the further I go on, the more simple my message is. Be smart with your training and get strong.
And you're not talking about, getting big and bulky and, spending hours in the gym and drinking protein shakes. And you're literally just talking about the things that are going to help you run faster. They may change your appearance a little bit, but usually to just, a more of a toned look than in other areas that you didn't have before, rather than getting a big and bulky. Just want to clarify that. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a fear of many runners. There's a few myths around strength training. One you've already identified well, Tina, and that's how will it help me when I just want to run? Mm-hmm. And the other is, I don't want to get bulky, but when we're doing endurance training, there's a thing called the interference effect where we just don't bulk up. It gets counteracted by the endurance running we're doing, but we do hold on to the tissue improvement. So we get better quality tissues, muscles, tendons, supporting structures, bones. I mean, there's a huge area, bone health for athletes, as we both know, Tina. You can improve bone mass through the right lifts done the right way. So there's no need to fear bulking up. That does not happen. The only one I know is Ryan Hall when he finished his running career, but that's because he just dropped his kilometres and he obviously was after that. I know you've had Ryan on. Actually, I'll speak with him tomorrow, but that anabolic effect is what he was after. But no one needs to fear bulking up whilst they're training for endurance. And
I think he was drinking like muscle milk like crazy, wasn't he, as well? Just to kind of, I think he wanted to go in the other direction, like really. Yeah. I did actually ask him that when he was on my podcast, and he did say, yeah, he wants to. He wanted to kind of go the other way. It like allowed him to kind of move on. So, I'm glad you mentioned that though, because I'm sure a few people's mind jumped there. But I don't want to look like Ryan Hall does now, and he's trying to do that. Okay, and then I know you well enough to know you'll be okay with this question, but you mentioned that you hadn't really run much or raced since 2016. Now, how did that make you feel? Like, was there any part of you feeling this like imposter syndrome? How can I be, telling people one thing and yet I can't stay healthy myself? I have a book called You Can Run Pain Free, and now I'm questioning if I can even do that. Tell us about that and if you're okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Initially, I felt frustrated that I just couldn't seem to get it right. I had surgery on my knee, and my problem was a cartilage split behind my kneecap. So in this, where the kneecap sits, it's called the trochlea, the groove of the femur. And to be honest, I hadn't done, I'd sort of dabbled. I just wanted it to settle down. I was trying to take the easy approach. I was busy, young children at home, business that needed me, etc. And so my left knee had the same problem 12 years earlier, and I had surgery on that, and it helped. And so, it was part of what helped. And so I thought, all right, I'm just going to go for the surgery again and then take it from there. But initially I just felt frustrated, but at no point have I really felt like an imposter. Yeah, the book sits there as a title, You Can Run Pain-Free, and that's the truth. There's truth in that. We can run pain-free. We've all enjoyed it. We're not injured every day of the year that we try and train. So we can all run pain-free. But the reality is that even with the best efforts, the best intentions, we will develop injury. That's just a given. So at no point have I felt like an imposter, but if anything, I could empathize with my patients and clients on a whole nother level. Not that I needed that because I'd already been through the woodwork with injuries over the years. But I guess I felt in some ways you get a bit disconnected from the euphoria that they share when they have a good run and you know what drives them, and you can feel a little bit distant from that feeling again. So it's really nice to rock up for a full day of patients at the practice and have had a run in the morning and, you know, just feel good about running again. So, but at no point have I felt like, well, I'm failing the process because I'm injured.
And I think that you're right. It probably did give you a way to connect with people and truly understand them and feel for them. And for anyone who hasn't heard, when I mentioned about being an imposter, there's a whole thing called imposter syndrome, which is where you kind of feel like you don't belong. And that's what I was kind of asking Brad about. I was literally accusing him of not being, you know, what he says. I know Brad well, and I knew he'd be okay with that. All right, I want to ask a question. Liz, who supports me on Patreon, wanted me to ask about older runners staying healthy. Now, I know you've done some work to look at this, and you've posted about it on your social media. What should older runners, what should they know about their running? You've mentioned strength training becomes even more important as we age, but what else?
Yeah, good question. And I do have a real passion for masters runners, and by definition, we'd say masters runners are 40 plus years. I mean, I'm 38 now, so I'm on the cusp of that. But the risk of being that broken record, the big change that happens is that reduction in strength. So tissue quality goes south. The tendons get sloppier, the bone mass declines. So, it's not a very sexy story, but it really can be turned around through strength training. And the mistake people make is they don't push hard enough in that capacity. And that's not starting from zero base and going to, super heavy loads overnight. That should be done over a process. So that's one thing, is to make sure the tissue quality stays as high as it can through regular and appropriate strength training. Probably the other thing for masters runners to take note of is the fact that, as we're maturing, we may not recover the same from hard sessions in terms of the training load. So allowing a little bit more time for recovery, trying to avoid that messy middle, which we can all get caught in, which is that, the 80-20 sort of principle. I mean, if it's a recovery run, make it a recovery run.
Yeah.
If it's a hard run, make it a hard run. And I think many mature runners just get into that rut. I'm going out, I'm running the same way, the same route at the same pace. And whilst there's still benefits, of course, there's benefits to that cardiovascularly and all the other things we know about running. We need to mix up the stimulus. So for masters runners, the other thing, apart from getting strong, allowing appropriate time for recovery, is mix it up, change the route, go hard on certain days, run some trails, get off the beaten track and just try and wake the body up, I guess.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I guess that does make sense when you think about it, because, our body loves change and constant. Well, I guess our body loves to be, similar, but our body responds well to different stimuli and kind of things changing up, especially when it comes to our physical exercise. So thank you for explaining that. And you mentioned at the very beginning, you do believe every single person on this planet could benefit from running in some capacity. Now, someone who's older than 50 or maybe even 60 or 70 or beyond, but has never run before, they've been told, it's too dangerous, you're too old to start, you shouldn't be doing it now. Is that the case? Do you believe that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, everyone can benefit from running no matter where they are when they start in terms of chronology. They just have to onboard in an appropriate way. It's really no different to the 20-year-old zealous runner starting. Everyone needs to just try and keep their seesaw balanced, and that seesaw being their they're loading or they're training their capacity to load on the other hand. And I can think of a great example of a lady here in Australia who just turned 70 2 weeks ago, and she was referred to me by her daughter, who's a triathlete, and she had some knee niggles. When the suggestion came up that she'd benefit from some strength and conditioning work on top of her running, she was a bit hesitant initially, and I took her into the gym and set up an appropriate program, and she now loves it. I've said to Barb's her name, Barb, you only need to be in the gym twice a week. And she's like, oh, no, I want to be in there 3 times a week. I absolutely love it. So, so once again, there's that theme. A maturing runner really needs to get their strength up as high as they can. And forget running. That's just for the benefits of life as we mature.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And that's so true. Okay, and then I have one other question from a Patreon member, which is a bit of a specific one, but I think it's one that actually more people than I may be anticipating are going to be wondering about. And that's that there's been a lot of kind of back and forth with injuries when it comes to your back, like particularly when someone has chronic back pain. What are your suggestions to someone, obviously, other than, as we've mentioned, going to see a professional, getting yourself diagnosed? If someone does have, chronic back pain, something that has been with them for many years, what would be your suggestion?
Yeah, back pain is actually was my first love in practice, Tina, because I'd had a lot of back pain while I was at uni. So I feel qualified to speak. And I mean, I could not have imagined a day when I was 24 that I wouldn't have back pain. I was been a lot of pain for a couple of years, and I'm now 38 and haven't had pain for 12 years. So if people are caught in a rut with back pain, once again, step one, get clearly diagnosed. Find out what it is, what's driving the pain.
Can I just pause you for a second there? When we say diagnosed, is your suggestion to go see a doctor, a physical therapist, a physiotherapist first, or should you go get an MRI, a bone scan, things like that first? Which one should be the first step?
An astute practitioner or therapist will be able to determine if imaging is required in a lot of instances. So that's step one. Get to someone that's reputable. That and how you source that is varied. Word of mouth is always a powerful tool. Of course, there's online. You can review online, etc. But look at someone that's interested in the field, of course. A good practitioner can determine if someone needs imaging. Scans can cause problems if they're not interpreted right. So that the images, there's a huge percentage. I think it's 50% of 50 to 60-year-olds have disc protrusions on imaging. Wow. Yet 50% don't have pain. So it's always contextual. The scan doesn't tell the complete story. It's the person in front of you that does. So, working with someone that knows their way around back pain is really important. And there's so many myths about back pain, and there's some really basic, I believe they're basic, simple principles that have stood the test of time. They're not fancy. They're not sexy. They're not hanging upside down from boots, for half an hour a day or all those weird and wacky things. It's just so commonsensical. Body weight, be within a striking distance of the genetic body weight that you're probably born to be as an adult. So if you're plus, excuse my ignorance of pounds, but, plus 20 kilos or, above your body weight ideally, then that's definitely not helping your frame, particularly your back. Where people can feel frustrated is they're in pain, and so therefore they don't feel like they can do as much, and they gain weight, which we all do, and we don't do our normal output of exercise, and they feel trapped. So that's where you've got to have a good practitioner to be able to lead the way to help them lose the weight and get on track. So that's one, look at the body weight. Two, once again, the broken record, get strong. I've never met a back that hasn't done well with common sense strength and conditioning. So back pain sufferers are often surprised when they hear me say, I need you in a gym doing squats. I need you in a gym doing deadlifts. I need you in the gym doing strict press overhead, some of these classic lifts to get your back 100% resilient again. And, they can be fearful because it's like, well, I can't even put my shoes or socks on. So obviously it's a process, it's a journey, but backs need to be strong.
So should they expect some pain doing those exercises to start with?
Not necessarily. The main cause of back pain is discogenic driven. So that's the discs being a source of pain. So if someone's got acute disc pain, you need to deal with their pain first and give them appropriate stuff that's relatively pain-free in terms of exercises. So that might be some Bulgarian split squats to stretch the quads and hip flexors out. I've really moved away over the years from giving passive stretches to back pain sufferers, and it's more active stuff. So, for example, I'll give about a split squat on a chair, regular walks. There's all these things you can do when you're in acute pain. The bigger journey. So I always break rehab Tina into two categories. There's pain reduction or symptom management, and then there's rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. And if someone's in a lot of pain, you've got to settle the pain down, get medication on board, avoid aggravating activities, educate the patient about the diagnosis. So remove some of the fear and the often incorrect beliefs about their back. So part of my back pain treatment is often getting the patient to write in their workbook, I do not have a bad back. I have a back that is currently sore. And they often smile as they write it, but their lights go on and they go, oh, this is no longer a threat. And you remind them that they're not going to have this forever. You're going to be okay. And just having someone tell them that can be the best rehab in itself.
Yeah.
But when you're in the tunnel of recurring back pain, and I've been there, you feel like you're never going to get out. So, reinforcing positive messages, distinguishing fears that don't have any place are all part of the initial therapy as well. And then as people get more confidence, more resilience, more autonomy and, agency, they find they can do more, and then they don't need a therapist. It's a really great journey working with people with back pain because you can really make some massive changes to their lives, but the principles are really simple.
Wow, I love that perspective change thing as well. And you could really apply that to any injury, couldn't you? It's not, I have a dodgy Achilles. You could just say, I have an Achilles that is sore. I'm working on it. Kind of. I love that. Thank you. Is that right?
Yeah, I had a gentleman, yes. Absolutely. I had a real high moment in the treatment room yesterday. I had a gentleman, he's a floorer, so he puts carpets and tiles and timber down on the floor. And he came in with tendinopathy or tendon pain above his kneecap. So you don't see that sort of tendon pain every day. He had it on both knees. It can be like sharp like a knife in his knee. He had this for 6 or 12 months in between that. And he'd stopped cycling. He'd stopped surfing. He'd stopped all the things that he loved. He'd stopped going to the gym. And we're only a couple of sessions in yesterday. He'd been sent off with the right work to do. Once again, it was predominantly exercise-based. Taken every measure he needed to improve. And he said to me during the treatment, he said, you've really got a lot of confidence in my knee, don't you? And I said to the gentleman, absolutely. There's nothing this knee can't do. You'll be there soon doing everything that you want and love to do. And, people can be naturally so concerned that pain equals damage, that pain means they shouldn't do anything. So you give them a license to understand how to interpret their pain, what to be mindful of, what not to be afraid of. And, they really, make great progress.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And thanks for sharing that story, because I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that as well. All right, let's talk about you. And you have your own podcast, The Physical Performance Show. I have been a guest on there, you've had a very, very impressive lineup of guests. Some people I would never even dream of getting on my show that you've managed to get on there. I've been really impressed with you. What can people expect, and what is it about your podcast that you believe stands out?
Tina, the podcast for me was just a natural extension of the conversations I'd have in a treatment room. And so 3 years ago, I thought, people that are pursuing their physical best performance, the conversations that I get to have with industry professionals and with people on the treatment table, I think could really help people. So that was the birth of it 3 years ago. And what can people expect? It's just conversations with, we call them expert editions, experts in the field, be it bone health, running injuries, nutrition, sleep, whatever it may be, athlete or performer editions, coaches. We try and throw some coaches in there, always fun. And then some interest editions, some just, left of field things that are fun. It might be a book that someone's released that's thought-provoking or something along those lines. So it's probably like yourself. It's a labor of love. When you host it, you enjoy doing it. If nothing else was achieved with the Physical Performance Show, then I learn and stay at the forefront of my craft, and I think it's a positive thing. Yeah.
And you guys get to listen to Brad talk, which isn't exactly a hard thing to do. So go listen to his podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. So, all right, we are just going to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and we'll be back with the Running for Real 4. Warmer weather is starting to get us, and even though we've forgotten all about those bad sides of it in our daydreams about the summer, the sweat pours down your face in those first few months. Well, it does for me. It used to drive me absolutely crazy when I would get a bead of sweat inside my earbuds. How it got in there, I don't know. And it would block the sound. I would try and get the sweat out, just the one drop. I would try and dry it, but you're already soaked and it just didn't work. But with aftershocks, you don't have to worry about that because they sit outside your ear and conduct the sound through bone conduction technology. Sounds intense, but it's ideal, especially this time of year when you're still adjusting to running outside without 3 million layers on. That being said, these can handle any weather conditions. Aftershocks have wide dynamic sound range, deep bass and dual noise cancelling mics. You can hear your music or podcast clearly and even have phone calls. I've tested that out too and left them on for a while I pretty much forgot that they were there. You can get $50 off Trex Air or Trex Titanium Endurance Bundle at tina.aftershocks.com. That's tina.aftershokz.com. I absolutely love mine and I have a feeling you will too. Friends, when you are in the middle of a marathon training slog, or any other training slog for that matter, you know when you feel just so damn exhausted, you don't know if you're going to make it to race day, let alone through the race, and you might just go curl up on the side of a road to take a nap. Yeah, I don't just remember those days, I feel them too, especially on the long runs. They are kicking my butt, but I don't know how I even used to make it through 24-mile long runs. One year, I even did a 17-minute 5K in the middle. Makes me exhausted even thinking about it. You know what helps though? A good recovery routine. Now, you heard Christy Ashwandon on here recently talking about how important it is for us to get more sleep. And like you, I hear her. Sleep is important. We know that. And we're trying so hard to get there, especially with those tips we learned from Amy this month. But it's not always as easy as it sounds, is it? How else can you help yourself recover then? Well, for me, taking Body Health Perfect Aminos every day helps a lot. It contains all the essential amino acids the body needs to support and maintain the muscular, skeletal, and hormonal system. Many people know that protein is essential for optimum health, but most assume that they're consuming enough through food. So why is there a need for an amino acid supplement? Well, the simple answer is, yeah, you do get quality aminos from your foods, such as eggs, meat, fish, nuts. But most of that protein in food is not converted into body protein, and it just kind of makes waste that the body has to get rid of. Perfect Amino is an amino acid supplement that is 99% utilized by the body to make protein. No other form of protein comes close. So hop on over to tinamuir.com/aminos. That's AMINOS to get yourself 10% off. They have a 100% money back guarantee. So what do you have to lose? Brad, I just have 4 more questions for you, starting with one piece of advice you would like to give the listeners for life.
Yeah, one piece of advice for life. Gosh, I'd say just don't look sideways. Just run your own race, stick in your own lane. I mean, comparison is such a stealer of joy, and I'm 38 years on the planet, and I don't think anyone gets through life unscathed without challenges, trauma, things that just want to make you curl up in the corner and just not move. So I think you just got to stay in your own lane, appreciate what other people are doing, but not ever get caught up in any sense of trying to measure up to other people. Just run your own race.
Mm-hmm. So true. Love that. And that can be applied to anything. All right. One person to follow on social media and why?
Oh, Tina.
And I will let everyone know that I did not give Brad these questions ahead of time. I should have done, but I was like, Brad's so good, like on the fly, that he'll be fine. So someone that you maybe, I don't know, follow who has, it doesn't have to be in the physio field. It could be someone that is inspiring. I have a feeling I know who you're going to say.
Oh gosh, dude. Who's that?
No. Well, if I think I could see you going for, I know you're a big fan of Kipchoge.
Yeah, I follow.
No, I don't want you to give him. Now I've said that. I don't know if you're going to.
Most runners. No, oh gosh, Tina, I it sounds so cliched, but I just find inspiration through so many different things. Whether it's not even running related, sometimes. I mean, I follow the Chili Peppers. I actually find a lot of
The Chili
inspiration.
Peppers, the
with
band?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I look at those guys doing what they love in their whatever decade they now are in, and they're doing it with vigor and full force and loving it. And I actually get inspired by that. So
That's cool.
that might be a bit of left field.
Okay, let's go for that. That's something unique and fun, and may inspire other people. I would never ever think to go follow them, but I will go check it out for sure. All right, how do you want to be remembered on this show?
Here's a cliched answer: real.
Okay, yeah, I love that. I thought you were going to say, how do you want to be remembered, for the guy who talked about strength training? But you're not the only one that's talked about strength training, so that doesn't make you stand out. But you are absolutely real, so thank you for that. All right, on that note, would you like to share a running for real moment with us?
Definitely. Running for real moment. Anything in particular you're looking for?
No, whatever you like. Something that, only runners will understand. You must have millions by now.
I just think every runner on the planet can resonate with those days where you just wonder if you should have put running shoes on. It's never ceased to amaze me over the years. You can come off the high of a good session where it means something to you. You've done splits that you're happy with, or you've clocked a good week of volume, or whatever it is. The niggles are finally at bay, and then you go into a run that shouldn't cause you any distress, and you just feel absolutely tired, miserable, heavy, lethargic. And you get better with it over time, but it still can rock your confidence a little bit, right? Like you're like, oh my gosh, am I that runner that does that? I just struggled to run around the block. I wanted to walk. So I think just the longer you go at it, the more you realize that those days will happen, and not to let it throw your confidence. So a running for real moment would be, don't let a bad day rock your confidence. Just keep going.
For sure. I love that. And I can definitely attest to that, of being known as the perfect pacer, the person who talks about not looking at their running watch and then going off 30 seconds per mile too fast. I hear you there, that that was hard not to be like, you stupid idiot, what are you doing? But anyway, all right, that's enough about me. All right, Brad, where can people find out more about you? I've mentioned your social media channels. Tell people where they can go find you. Tell us where you are if someone happens to be lucky enough to be able to go see you in person, or, they don't want to see you for that reason, but maybe they'll see you, just pass you in the street. We don't want them to go visit you in your practice, but where is it? Because one day I'm going to come and knock on your door and give you the biggest hug ever. So tell us a bit more. Where can people find you?
You're most welcome, Tina. So Pogo Physio is the practice that I founded 12 years ago. We're located on the Gold Coast, Australia, which is between Sydney and Brisbane.
Heaven on earth.
Yeah, it's a pretty place. Beaches, great marathon every year. So it's a really great running destination. So that's where the practice is. I'm easily found. Most things that my name will pick up at Brad_Beer on Instagram. That's where I do try and keep up a regular feed of hopefully helpful information. And one of the things I enjoy is Tendon Tuesday, which is a passion of mine in practice. So every Tuesday I post something related to how to look after tendons. So over on Instagram, the podcast is the Physical Performance Show, Tina, as you've mentioned, and that's wherever you get podcasts. And obviously 4 years ago I put out You Can Run Pain Free, and that since has been expanded and revised into a second edition in 2018. So that's available wherever books are sold, and excited to be working on a second project now, which is focused on the needs of the Masters runner. So I think the challenge with writing a book is you feel like you'd change it every week that goes forwards after that. So looking forward to getting some current thoughts on paper, and available on all those different spots. So reach out, any questions. I'm always happy to help in any capacity.
Yeah, I did not know that about that coming out soon. So that is exciting, and we'll have to have you back on then. And actually, on that note, Brad, just on a personal note, and as I know he is listening right now, and many of my community also appreciate this guy, I want to give you a thank you for introducing me to David. He knows who he is. He was one of the winners of, when I last had you on Run to the Top, you did a giveaway. David was one of the winners. He's now my right-hand man within my community, probably one of the best known people within the Superstars community. And had it not been for you, Brad, I would have never really connected with him. So I know lots of Superstars appreciate him for all that he does. And as you are the tie there, I just want to give him a thank you and you a thank you for introducing us. So,
Oh, that's great.
All right, Brad. Thank you for everything you've shared on this show. For anyone listening, be sure to go back to listen to those previous episodes. They will be in the show notes. You can get the Coming Back from Injury series. Brad, as I said, mostly focuses on the emotional side, which is obviously a huge part of being injured. And he did a fantastic job in that series. So go check that out as well. Brad, anything else you would like to say to anyone listening before we shoot off?
No, just keep running. And as always, Tina, great to connect, and well done on the work that you do. You make running, seem achievable for people and break down some of those barriers that can otherwise keep people sidelined, that are looking at the sport going, oh, can I do it or can't I? So thank you for all the service you provide to runners worldwide.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Isn't he the best? He's just so giving and kind and just wonderful. Go follow his social media if you haven't already, and you'll find solid gold there every single day. This was a bit of a random episode with the questions I asked, but I would strongly recommend going back and listening to the Run to the Top interviews I did with Brad years ago. There are links in the show notes, along with a link to my Coming Back from Injury podcast series, which had Brad's episode in there that was mainly focused on the mental side of injuries, and it was a really powerful one. You can find links to that and everything else we talked about in the show notes today at tinamuir.com/episode 116. And next week, we will be talking to the one and only Dina Castor. Dina has done her rounds on the other podcasts, but I've never had the chance to bring her on mine, and I'm going to change that, as she is truly one of the best distance runners I've ever seen, and her story is just inspiring. She is just an even better person than you can imagine. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so then it comes straight to you on Friday. The following week, I have some extra special stuff, so that's another reason to subscribe and be ready. Until then, have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.